It's difficult to pinpoint what exactly makes a performance scary. It's not just what the character says or does, but how the actor makes them feel while they're doing it. Often the most famous villains are hidden behind masks or covered in makeup. They're not just staring down the barrel of the lens to spook us out. When it came to casting Hannibal Lecter, lots of actors were considered. Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Sean Connery, all of which would have had different takes on the character.
Karen's number tastes like Albany.
But lucky for us, director Jonathan Demme decided he wanted a Shakespearean monster, so the role ended up going to Anthony Hopkins. By 1990, Anthony, or Tony as he prefers to be called, was already an Olivier-winning theatre actor, but despite popping up in classic movies like The Elephant Man and A Bridge Too Far, he had come to the point in his film career where he was just going to take one final big swing at breaking into Hollywood's A-list. And if that didn't work, he would return to Britain to focus on theatre instead. Little did he realise that it was now at the age of 53 that he was about to deliver a performance that would not only change his life, but change the audience's expectations of what a villain should be. Although you would imagine Hopkins did lots of research into serial killers and murderers before assuming the role, you'd be wrong, he actually didn't do any.
Well, in preparing for Lecter, do any case studies of some of these serial killers?
No, they're too distasteful. I didn't. I didn't do any research.
Instead, he just intuitively knew how to play Lecter, partly basing him on a brutal yet charismatic acting teacher he once had at the Royal Academy. But most importantly, the actor understood the psychology of scaring the viewer. You have to turn their expectations on their head so that they feel unnerved by what they're witnessing. He stated, if you're playing somebody who's mad, the thing is to not play him mad, but play the opposite. Play him as ultra sane. If you're playing somebody who's evil, play the good side of him. And that makes him more scary because you humanize him. Because nobody is all evil, nobody is all good, whatever those terms mean, but nobody is all one thing. So what I do as an actor is to find out what the other side of the character is, and I found out with Lecter that in fact, I think his problem is, or his peculiar psychology is, he's so totally in control of every aspect of his thinking that he's completely mad, because nobody can be in that much control. It's as if he's so sane, he's flipped over into the world of the dark and the irrational. Anthony gives a lot of credit to the director, set designers, costume department and crew for creating the perfect atmosphere around him, so that all he had to do was show up and say the lines. And although he's obviously downplaying what he delivered, given how much lesser the sequels ended up, a lot of credit does have to go to Jonathan Demme's decision to shoot from this intimate point of view angle, as he clearly trusted his actors to carry the weight of the scene up close. He just let Hopkins do his thing and play the character as he saw fit, even improvising some of the most impactful creative flourishes throughout the film. So let's take a deeper look at how Anthony Hopkins perfected playing Dr. Hannibal Lecter. We'll start with the physicality of the character. The introduction to Dr. Lecter is easily one of the most famous moments in film history. Clarice walks down the corridor, passing increasingly crazy prisoners until she arrives at her final stop. And Hopkins is unexpectedly standing there, perfectly upright, with his hands by his side, waiting for her. This is a striking first impression, and actually came from the actor himself.
Well, I'm going to be very conceited. I'll take the credit. Tony said, how do you feel you'd like to be discovered? He said, we talk about you all the time before we get to the cell. I said, well, I had an idea a couple of nights ago, maybe last night. I said, something that really spooks me is people standing alone in a single empty room.
Given Lecter is a cannibalistic psychiatrist, he wants to get psychologically closer and closer to his subjects, to understand them on a deeper level. But this then bleeds into a physical desire. He doesn't just want to talk about their most intimate self, he wants to be physically close to them too. So as if infatuated, Hopkins moves closer and closer to his subjects. He craves physical contact, touching their skin and body in whatever way he can. It's a sensual performance. He wants to hear them, touch them, smell them, and eventually taste them. And what could be more intimate than physically eating someone's body? The character is a sort of reincarnation of Dracula, and there are moments where the actor appears to intentionally pay homage to him. For example, in the script, it simply has Lecter ask Clarice what Miggs next door said to her, and she tells him it was that he could smell her. But Hopkins then improvises this lengthy inhale into his nostrils, like a shark being seduced by the scent of blood, before he tilts his head back down with this vampiric look on his face. These little improvisations help to create the tone of the character. Like when he gets handed the questionnaire through his food tray, the script reads, he rises, glances at it, turning a page or two disdainfully. So there is a cue there for the actor to insert whatever feels right, and here's what Hopkins comes up with. He sexualizes it, stares at her and licks his finger, which as a cannibal takes on a more unsettling meaning, but then smiles and winks at her. He doesn't make it turning a page or two disdainfully, he makes it playfully inappropriate, which is a theme for the character. He likes to play with his food. The next key is his eyes. When asked if he thought Silence of the Lambs could ever work as a play, Hopkins insisted that thrillers don't work on stage, as you need the power of the lens. And Jonathan Demme uses that power to its full extent by allowing his stars to perform directly into the camera. That way we experience what it feels like to be looked at by Lecter, how he stares at you like prey. Hopkins made a conscious effort not to blink throughout his performance wherever possible, as he wanted the audience to feel the certainty of the psychopath.
I think it's the certainty within them that's attractive. The unblinkered look into the darkness.
He never blinked. So I based Lecter. Never blinked. He kept asking me questions. Then before you could answer them, he'd ask you another one and another one. And in the end, it made you feel that you were in a different reality.
And as Hannibal, now I realize you didn't move a lot.
No, and I didn't blink.
And you didn't blink?
No.
This works on multiple levels. If he's not blinking as he explains something violent or depraved, it makes him seem psychopathically detached. And then when he maintains eye contact with the audience, it's not just hypnotic, but also adds weight to the scene. It feels like it matters because you feel what it's like to be in it, being closely monitored by a caged, bloodthirsty animal who's taken an interest in you. But acting isn't just how you look while you say your lines, it's about how you react while listening to others. As a viewer, we need to see the character processing information, and Hopkins does it all through his eyes. For instance here, when Clarice explains the details of the case, watch how Anthony uses his eyes to show his character calculating, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together in his mind. When she describes her personal life, he turns his back to her. That way he can just listen and react to what she's saying with his computing pupils. Then when he demands he's given a room with a window and a view in exchange for his services, notice how Hopkins steps into the light to physically indicate a change of scenery, and his eyes scan as if he's already envisioning the view he desires. When he does finally blink, it usually serves a purpose, like to express empathy when Clarice reveals she's lost both her parents.
He lasted more than a month. My mother died when I was very young, so...
After making such an effort to not blink to show certainty, these blinks now carry more weight for the viewer. They convey the crushing blow each loss would have been to Clarice, the second blow landing harder than the first. Even when Hopkins is given very little room to work with, he still subtly communicates with his eyes. For example, when he's wearing the mask, all we can see is the top half of his head, and while he remains stoic and unmoving for most of the scene, at the end, when he compliments the victim's mother's suit, he injects all of this alluring, squinting energy into his eyes before widening them at the end so that he looks even more insane.
Oh, and Senator, just one more thing. Love your suit.
And now we come to the final key, his iconic vocal delivery. Anthony Hopkins said he based the character's voice on 3 people: Truman Capote, Katharine Hepburn, and the robot Hal from 2001: A Space Odyssey. So see if you can hear a little Lecter in these 3 clips.
And the staff of the prison. I think it's an interesting film.
I got here at 9 o'clock, and I have the best costume. And I think you're someday going to be a big star.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me. And I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Hal is the most striking comparison, and by adding this robotic tone to the performance, Hopkins creates an unusual anomaly of hot and cold qualities. He's simultaneously able to emotionally understand you on a deeper level than anyone else, while also being a cold, calculated killer. This makes you like and fear the character in equal measure. But it's the little details that Hopkins adds to the script that really bring it to life. For instance, after the famous line, "I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti," Hopkins unexpectedly inserted this slurping sound out of nowhere. But it goes further than that. In this same scene, the script continues that he says, "Fly back to school, little starling," and see if you can hear what Anthony adds in.
You fly back to school now, little starling. Fly, fly, fly. Fly, fly.
By repeatedly whispering "fly, fly, fly," he creates a more playful tone to their communications. He later continues this hypnotic repetition when discussing the fate of the victim Catherine. The script reads, "Pity you tried to fool me, pity for poor Catherine, tick-tock." He spins again in his chair playfully. But rather than just telling us he's playful, Hopkins makes him sound more playful in his speech rather than his movements.
Yeah. That was good. Pity about poor Catherine, though. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock.
This makes it a mental battle between the two characters. They're in a game of poker and time is running out. But to make sure the audience feel like he's just toying with her, Anthony improvises this condescending tutting sound whenever she disappoints him.
It won't do.
This makes it feel like a cynical game of cat and mouse, and he's just playing with his food. In another unscripted moment, when he's bargaining for that room with a view, Clarice demands he tells her what he knows, and out comes this line.
Tell me who decapitated your patient, Doctor.
All good things to those who wait.
Again, this creates a playful dynamic between the characters that just doesn't exist on the page in the same way. Pulling out these biblical phrases and repeating words like he's reading a nursery rhyme, the actor is showing us that the character doesn't really care that a woman's life is on the line. Whether she lives or dies will not rest heavy on his conscience. This is all just a little game he's playing to get what he wants, to amuse himself. In the sequel Hannibal, Hopkins improvises these same playful inflections. When he's killing a victim, instead of saying "all right" or "here we go" like it says in the script, he goes with the uncomfortably light "okie dokie."
Okie dokie, okie dokie, here we go.
Which is of course an inappropriately playful thing to say in the context of taking a human life. And then as he approaches the window to hang his victim out on the street, he nonchalantly whistles like it's the most casual thing in the world. So Hopkins is adding all of these psychological beats to the storytelling that make it far more alive than simply reading the lines. He's breathing life into every scene. But even when he's not improvising and just sticks to the script, a great actor doesn't just say the lines, they choose which parts to emphasize, which words to speed up, and which words to slow down.
Social acceptance and sexual frustrations.
No, he covets.
Here Hopkins wraps the word covets in this slithering hissing sound. He easily could have just said, "No, he covets," or shouted, "No, he covets," to make his point, but instead he hisses it out because coveting is a sin, and he's vocally embodying the serpent in the garden. By delivering such a wide range of vocal inflections, the actor is creating a unique rhythm for his character, which completely distinguishes him from anyone you've ever heard before. A clear illustration of how Anthony's delivery adds emotional layers to the dialogue is when Lecter is reading Clarice like a book in their opening scene. Hopkins locks his eyes onto his target and doesn't blink, abusing her with verbal accuracy. When he focuses on the accent she tried to lose, the actor chooses to slip into what he believes is her real accent.
What does your father do? Is he a coal miner? Does he stink of the land?
This brings his theory of who she is to life. He's becoming her to mock her. He then continues embodying Clarice, closing out the scene by saying, all those tedious sticky fumblings in the back seats of cars, while you could only dream of getting out, getting anywhere, getting all the way to the FBI. But he doesn't just read it straight, he adds a desperate whisper to getting out, getting anywhere, as if he's directly transcribing her thoughts at the time she was thinking them.
While you could only dream of getting out, getting anywhere, getting all the way to the FBI.
And then of course he widens his eyes with no blinking, as if to emphasize that I see you for who you really are. You can't fool me, there's nowhere to hide. This is the highest level of acting. Every decision adds texture, tone, and layers to the exchange, so that we're not just hearing the dialogue, we're feeling every syllable. The performance rightly earned Anthony Hopkins his first Best Actor Oscar, as to this day, his portrayal of Hannibal Lecter consistently tops list after list of the greatest movie villains of all time. But somehow, he managed to leave one of the most lasting impressions in cinematic history with just 16 minutes of screen time. So between his off-the-cuff improvisations, his inescapable eye contact, and his unique vocal delivery, he truly made every second count, and delivered one of the most hypnotic performances the world has ever seen. Well, if you've made it this far, firstly, thank you for watching, but if you could now give the video a like, possibly even leave a comment and click on that subscribe button, it will encourage that mysterious algorithm to do its thing.